I had no fancy title like the priests yammered on about. No hunter of darkness or blade of righteousness. My name is Ash, and they just called me Cleaner. The kind of cleaner who ends threats the church deems too unholy to touch. Ones even their Templars can't handle. Monsters, witches, whatever lurks in the shadows and makes God-fearing citizens wet themselves. Yeah, that was my daily grind. So here I was, trudging through another backwater hamlet. The rains of spring had reduced to knee-deep muck. Every breath reeked of stagnant water, rot, and a hint of something metallic lurking beneath it all. Not blood, something sharper, iron maybe, but iron's in the dirt, right? I shoved the unease down. Paranoia wouldn't keep me alive. "Must be you then," coughed a raspy voice from a doorway deeper in the alley. It belonged to one of the village elders, withered as old leather and just as tough. I nodded, not bothering with pleasantries. "Problems at the old windmill," he spat, flecks of mucus speckling his thin beard. "3 nights past, something awful showed up. Wings, they say. Folks gone missing since." He shoved a crudely drawn map into my hands. Wings were always a pain. You can outrun most horrors on the ground, but flight means your back's a target. But a job's a job, and coin warms you as well as righteousness. Windmills meant flatland, miles of empty fields leading up to the crumbling mill atop its lonely hill, like a carcass for the crows. That or whatever wing nasty decided to set up shop within. Not even a raven in sight, even carrion eaters knew to get lost. As dusk deepened, the mill loomed over me, its broken blades casting monstrous shadows. They shifted like claws against the sickly red of the setting sun. That's when I saw it. I'd always assumed the villager tales were mostly old folks' gibberish. No more. Silhouetted against the bloody sky was not a beast, but the shape of a man. Tall, broad-shouldered. Huge wings unfolded from its back, feathers gleaming like wet oil in the twilight. My first thought wasn't of terror, but of something I never felt on a hunt. Awe. Not the good kind, but the raw fear that seizes you at the brink of a cliff. Your gut warning you there's only the plunge down if you take one more step. No weapon could touch a thing like that, at least none a mere man carried. Time, then, to even the odds. I reached into my satchel, not for my sword, but for the cloth-bound vials within. These weren't holy charms, despite what the townsfolk thought. No, these were my creations, alchemical concoctions brewed from rare ingredients and even rarer knowledge. If something lived and breathed, I had a potion to choke the life out of it. One vial went onto my sword, an oily mix to make the steel burn like dragonfire. Another I gripped in my hand, a fog bomb to give me cover. This wasn't about heroism, just survival. Hunters that think otherwise usually wind up the hunted. The creature above turned, head tilting as if scenting me. Gods damn it! The wind shifted. Then it moved, not in a rush but a slow, horrifying descent. It didn't so much walk towards me as glide, each step more liquid than human. Then, the moonlight hit its face. Not pale and gaunt like the dead, but flushed with beauty. No, that was wrong. I'd seen beauty, seen enough of it to know this was something foul wearing its skin. But those eyes, cold and burning with unnatural light. It spoke, and what I thought was thunder was its voice, echoing over the deserted fields. Another comes to feed me. How kind. Time to see if Cleaner can take on an angel of death. The silence shattered as I launched myself forward, not in a glorious charge, but a desperate scrabble through the mud. There was no outthinking this, no clever tactic, just forcing it to fight in close quarters before it could fly again. The thing, the angel, whatever it was, merely sighed, a long, disappointed sound. No rush, no panic. It knew precisely how this would end. My sword swung as I closed the distance, the potion dripping like molten wax from the blade. Each step churned the earth, mud clinging to my boots like weights. Too slow, too predictable, just as it wanted. That's when I saw its smile. Not cruel, but filled with a terrible pity. "Such effort," it murmured, voice almost gentle. Before my strike could land, it blurred, movement so pure it defied logic. The thing sidestepped me like I was standing still. In that instant, instinct replaced thought. I didn't fling myself towards it. I hurled the fog bomb at my own feet. The vial smashed, spewing its concoction in a choking white cloud. No way it could see me, and no way I could see it. For a heartbeat, there was only thick silence. Then the coughing started, not choking gasps, but ragged, wet sounds. The angel wasn't immune, just hindered. Inhuman strength didn't mean much if you couldn't see to use it. I launched into the fog, sword leading. One swipe, two, not seeking flesh, just finding something solid in the blinding haze. And I did. My sword met resistance, hard as iron. Then the sickening screech of metal on metal. For a fleeting second, I saw a single, blazing eye amidst the white, filled with pure fury. My sword was ripped from my grip, clattering away. In its place, I felt a vice-like grip around my throat. Pain bloomed red behind my eyes as I was lifted off my feet. "Such waste," the angel rasped, each word squeezing tighter. "You should have fled while you could." It might have been beautiful once, with those soft features and luminous eyes. But now there was a wrongness to them, like looking at a perfect statue and noticing a single hairline crack marring its surface. Now I understood. Its prettiness was the most horrifying element of all. Darkness seeped into my vision, my desperate struggles weakening. Just as oblivion promised blissful release, a new scent pierced the fog. Sulfur, copper, and something almost floral. Then came the heat, scorching the skin at my back. With a shriek that blasted through me like a lance, the thing dropped me. It staggered backward, clutching at its back, where feathers now smouldered and blackened flesh bubbled beneath. My sword lay abandoned in the mud, untouched, but something else seeped with malevolent fire where it rested. A shard of broken glass from the fog bomb vial. No, not just glass. The oily potion had coated it, and now it burned with alchemical rage. Stupid chance, blind luck, the weapon of a desperate man. Maybe the gods weren't as absent as I like to think. The angel recoiled, wings flaring defensively. In the sudden open space, hope ignited abruptly. Just maybe. "Insect!" It snarled. The beautiful voice turned jagged. It reached out, not to attack, but to snatch at the glowing shard. The moment its talon touched, a burst of blinding light and a roar not of rage, but unfiltered agony shook the night. I crawled, scrambled. I didn't look back, not while that scream filled the air, and not when finally, mercifully, it ceased. I stumbled through the clearing, legs on autopilot, breath raw in my throat. Whether exhaustion, relief, or plain terror pushed me on, I didn't know. I just needed to get away before the damn thing, not even an it anymore, surely, recovered. There was an old wives' tale I'd heard once. Something about angels always leaving feathers behind, a memento of sorts. A chill swept over me, worse than the night air. If that horror followed its own twisted nature, it'd track me by that same twisted logic. My eyes darted to the ground, scanning for any telltale gleam in the darkness. Nothing. Then a tremor shook the earth beneath me. Something massive was moving, shifting in the direction of the ruined mill. No more time. If even my dumb luck had wounded it that badly, maybe, just maybe, a swift death was a mercy better than whatever warped its nature. My legs ached in protest, but I turned back towards the windmill. No fancy plan this time. No potions or tricks. Just me, a sword meant for mortal flesh, and whatever scraps of courage lay under the grime and exhaustion. That damned creature had underestimated me once. Wouldn't happen again. The mill itself was in complete darkness now, as if even the moonlight itself feared to breach the threshold. In its inky silhouette, something unsettling glowed, coming from within. The shriek started the moment I stepped past the rotting doorframe. An ear-splitting wail, not born of pain, but of pure, unrestrained hatred. Then the glow flared brighter and poured towards me like liquid light, tendrils of it curling with unnatural intensity. I raised my sword, more shield than weapon, bracing myself. Then, with an awful groan of ancient timbers, the entire structure toppled in on itself. The roof collapsed inwards, showering me in dust and rotted wood. Through the haze, all I saw was the fiery glow receding, shrinking back into the epicenter of the ruin. Then nothing. Not even the howl of rage anymore, just the creak of fallen lumber and my own rasping breaths. My knees buckled and I landed hard. Coughing, I dragged myself back onto my feet. There was the stench of ozone now, sharp and metallic, hanging heavy in the air and stinging my eyes. Finally, my fingers found the battered scabbard at my waist. I slotted my sword into it with a click of finality. Whether the angel, the thing, was dead or retreated to lick its wounds, I didn't know. Didn't want to know. The first tentative glow of dawn crept over the horizon as I staggered away from the ruins. Every groan of old bones, every twig snapping underfoot sounded like pursuit. Even when the ruined village emerged from the darkness, there was no relief. Not for a long time. There never truly is. After you touch the darkness and it touches you back. But with the rising sun, there was one certainty. That thing hunted with the moon. For today at least, I'd survived. Today, it was safe to walk away. I didn't head back to the village. Couldn't bear the questions, the awed looks that had morphed into pity when those idiots realized that yes, something terrible touched me out there, and there was no shaking it off. Besides, my work there was done. Whatever done looked like after you trade one kind of nightmare for another. Instead, I followed the dirt track leading further in from the hamlet into the denser parts of the forest. Each snap of a twig underfoot made me flinch, the shadows morphing into twisted shapes. No more winged horrors, but after that, well, there's always wolves, or men, even worse. But right then, my exhaustion outweighed even fear. Finally, a break in the trees. A clearing. In its center stood the gnarled shell of an ancient oak. At its base, roots burrowed so deep they were like benches built into the earth itself. Here I slumped, propped against the rough bark, and finally succumbed to the bone-deep weariness. There was only the soft sigh of the trees and the rhythmic rasp of my own breathing. This was almost peace. Almost. Because sleep never came easy to me. Not since, well, never mind when. But as my eyelids grew heavy, the half-formed dreams weren't of the angel, though that face, seared into my memory, was sure to haunt me soon enough. No, this dream was just an old house, peeling paint, the warm stink of cooked apples that were always about to go rotten, and an echo of something like laughter coming from a room with the door always firmly shut. It wasn't scary, the dream. It was more heavy. A kind of dread I couldn't shake even when I forced myself awake with a gasp. Bleary-eyed, I stumbled to my feet. That damn dream left me more exhausted than even the night before. Still, better get moving. No use lingering where even the nightmares started to feel familiar. My hand was reaching for the hilt of my sword when I saw it, a single crow feather lying beside a twisted root. Its iridescent black gleamed in the weak sunlight pushing through the trees. My breath hitched. That wives' tale? It couldn't be, could it? No, surely just a stray bird, not... Before I could finish the thought, rustling broke the quiet. Leaves shifted above, not from the wind but from something moving through them. Something quick and heavy. Then 2 points of burning light pierced the canopy, fixing on me from the shadowed branches. Those weren't just bird eyes. Something bigger watched me. It didn't swoop down, didn't even issue a threatening squawk. Just observation. Unblinking and full of that same icy intelligence that burned in the angel's gaze. Then, with a swift rustle of wings, it disappeared back into the darkness of the high branches. That wasn't just a memento that thing had left. It was a message. One meant just for me. The feather felt scorching hot in my palm. With a curse, I dropped it back on the earth. One damn problem never truly ended, it seemed, just transformed. Now, I wasn't just a cleaner, I was prey. Hunted by something I barely understood, let alone knew how to defeat. The crow feather lay mockingly where I'd dropped it. I turned away sharply, not back towards the village, but further into the thickening woods. It wouldn't follow me in the full light of day, not yet. I had time. Time to make a new plan. A desperate one. Because now surviving against that twisted angel just became a lot less likely. I pushed through the bramble undergrowth, the midday sun dappling my tattered clothes in a patchwork of warmth and shadow. No clear path lay ahead. No friendly village at the end of some road. I wasn't a woodsman, just a man running on instinct, and maybe a whisper of that same blind luck that had saved my hide with the angel. Gut instinct said go west, towards the coast maybe. If that thing hunted the night, then vast water and open shores might keep it at bay. No way I was holing up in caves or ruins to tempt it any further. I needed space. Something even worse than me couldn't hide easily in endless fields and rolling dunes. Then there was the whisper, not loud, just an insistent nudge at the back of my mind. You need help, it said. The kind you only find in places people forget exist. Not churches. After that mess, faith tasted like ashes on my tongue. But there were older powers, the ones whispering in crumbling, moss-covered stones, and the songs of women whose names had turned to half-remembered rhymes. I wasn't sure I believed, but I hadn't believed in flying horrors with pretty faces either. Now? Desperate times were the breeding ground for new convictions. So I veered northwesterly, following the sun and that odd tug. My hunter's senses mingling with a primal instinct that bordered on animal desperation. Every whisper of wind, every rustle of leaves was scrutinized, the crow's parting stare branded into my memory. For days, that fear stalked me, pushing me further than my tired legs should allow. Each night was a restless, dream-haunted sleep, my body snatching a few uneasy hours under the open sky while my mind stayed on vigil. On the fourth day, something changed. The air itself smelled different, sharper, a metallic tang with a hint of salt. No longer thick with earth and the rot of dying leaves, this scent hinted at open spaces and wind that cut through you as much as around you. The sea whispered promises of salty breezes and a kind of isolation I desperately craved. Ahead, through the screen of dense pines, a strange glow painted the horizon. Not gold like sunset or the blood-red moonrise the angel favored, but an odd, silvery sheen. Not enough to illuminate the forest floor, but a guiding beacon nonetheless. A final burst of weary determination pushed me out of the tree line and onto a wide stretch of coastal moor. The ground dipped and rolled, heather whipping around my ankles, wind cutting through my sweat-soaked clothes with a vengeance. My breath rasped as I crested a hillock and finally understood the source of the strange light. There lay the sea, not the gentle waves of a harbour, but cold, grey, and frothing under an overcast sky. But it was what stood upon the very edge of the headland that froze me in my tracks. The old women called them sea circles. Ringstones, they sometimes whispered, with a mixture of awe and fear. They stood sentinel here, rough granite carved by forgotten millennia, each as tall as a grown man. There were 9 in all, spaced in a rough oval overlooking the water. Each bore the marks of countless storms, salt stains running like frozen tears down the pitted rock. No carvings, no hint to who had placed them here or why. Yet the moment I crossed the invisible threshold into their embrace, that insistent inner tug ceased. My haunted breaths found some respite, and the relentless pressure behind my eyes finally, mercifully eased. In their silent embrace, under that cold, unforgiving sky, there was finally a semblance of shelter. Maybe it was just my exhausted mind playing tricks, or maybe some old magic still clung to these weathered stones. Or, most frightening of all, perhaps it knew it couldn't follow me here. That I'd somehow crossed into a territory beyond its reach. Either way, I crumpled against the nearest stone, letting my aching body sag for the first time in days. This place held no salvation. Not really. But for the moment, it was enough. I'd survived. Tomorrow, I'd figure out the rest. I woke not to the shriek of the angel, but the cry of gulls wheeling overhead. Bleary-eyed, I pushed myself upright, the stone I'd slept against biting into my spine. Salt wind and the metallic tang of the open sea were all-encompassing, driving out the last cobwebs of the haunted forest. It was still early, the dawn sun a weak pink smear, and I was finally, completely alone. Well, mostly alone. I glanced down to see a sleek brown creature eyeing me from a safe distance. A sleek river otter, not even remotely afraid. With those intelligent eyes and playful whiskers, it looked deceptively harmless. Almost made me miss that chunk missing from its ear. This coast wasn't just harsh on people, but there was a wiry toughness about it that mirrored something in me. That, or we were both just too battered to bother fighting. "You seen anything nasty with wings the past few days?" I rasped, knowing damn well it wouldn't answer. Otters don't understand human words, and even if they did, my question was half joke, half fervent prayer. It just sat there, head cocked as if considering. Seemed that survivors understood something of each other, even across the divide of species. But this place wasn't paradise, just less of a hell. I stretched stiff muscles, grimacing at the symphony of pops and creaks from my abused body. Time to stop treating this ring of stones like sanctuary and more like a base camp. I needed food, fresh water, maybe some shelter against the relentless wind. I'd figure out the maybe someone here can fight something inhuman part later. It took most of the morning to do a full survey. Beyond the ring stones, the headland dipped low into a cove, rocky, barnacle-crusted but protected from the worst of the open waves. Maybe there was fish to be caught, driftwood to make a crude shelter. It was a plan. A crappy one, but still better than starving or freezing while waiting for whatever hunted me to decide that sea air improved its appetite. By full daylight, I'd snagged enough limpets and a half-rotted crab to stave off full-on hunger pangs. Water was trickier. No streams this far out, and the wind had whipped up, making the waves pound the cove with a fury that ruled out wading in for salt water. My thirst burned hotter than the hunger, sharp and relentless. It was in that desperate frame of mind I stumbled upon it. Not hidden, just tucked away where the headland curved in slightly, a shallow depression in the hard-packed earth. No more than 3 feet across, the exposed roots of an ancient thorn bush wound around its rim. Within, glistening in the reflected sunlight, lay water. Clear, still water, tasting faintly metallic, but fresh all the same. An old tale stirred to life in my memory. Something my mother used to say, in that soft voice I could barely picture anymore. "There's always water out in the wildlands, lad, if you know where to look for the signs." She would tell tales of dew hollows, sap veins of certain trees, the secret pools only birds and small beasts knew. Maybe this was some kind of dew hollow, the morning mists trapped by the earth for the first who arrived to claim it. Or maybe it was just luck, finally swinging my way. I knelt, cupping a hesitant hand and bringing the water to my parched lips. It was cold, shockingly so against my cracked skin, clean enough on the tongue. No hint of poison, just an undertaste of ancient rock and wild thyme. I drank deep, ignoring the faint prickling sensation that danced where the water touched my skin. I wasn't a scholar, No expert in old earth magic or how it might mingle with raw survival. Right then, I couldn't afford to care. Not long after my meager rations, sleep caught me again, and I slumped by the tiny pool, oblivious to the darkening sky overhead. I dreamed of my mother then, her face bathed in a warm light I hadn't seen since childhood. No nightmares of angels came. No visions of that twisted feather. Just her, smiling, the way I could hardly remember anymore. My eyes snapped open to the shriek of gulls, but this wasn't just their idle chatter. There was a frenzy to it now, wings beating like desperate hands against the overcast sky above. Then I saw it, a lone black speck silhouetted above the turbulent waves. Circling lower and lower it came, until even from this distance I recognized the broad, shadowed shape. Fear surged through my veins, but beneath it was a core of ice-cold fury. No more running. It had tracked me this far, fine. Now it had learned why even mere men have fangs. The fury wasn't the reckless kind. It was the measured, desperate fury of a backed-up rat. Not brave, just without alternatives. For a sliver of a second, I wished for my satchel, my alchemical bombs, something, anything to give me a fighting chance. Then I glanced at the circle of stones, that old pull I felt within them, that faint promise of protection. Maybe there was something to it that mere swords and vials couldn't match. So I ran and not away. I ran towards the stones, feeling a primal surge of relief with every stride that put them between me and the descending horror. Let's make this interesting, shall we? I spat at the empty air. That damn thing loved taunts, loved hearing the terror in your voice. I wouldn't give it that satisfaction. My fingers scrabbled on the ancient stone, finding weathered edges I could use to haul myself up. Not graceful, but at least now I held the high ground. The creature landed where I'd stood just moments ago. And there it was, no longer a distant speck, but horrifyingly real. The beauty hadn't faded, that much was undeniable. In the dull grey light, it seemed almost sculpted from black marble, an angel made perverse and wrong. Then it lowered its head, those burning eyes fixing on me with predatory intensity. A low sound started as a murmur, growing in strength until it resonated off the very stones under my feet. My blood ran cold. It was laughing. "No escape this time, insect! The hunt is at its end!" Its voice rasped louder than the crashing sea, each word echoing with cold glee. It tilted its head, studying me. That look was worse than a blade. It was the careful evaluation of a butcher about to choose the most effective cut. Then, as casually as one might brush a fly away, it reached out with one dark-taloned hand. Its claws skimmed the edge of the ringstone I perched on, and a jagged crack splintered its surface. Not deep, but a warning shot all the same. Turns out even ancient magic needs a few inches of solid granite to work properly. Fear flared like a kicked bonfire, then was doused by something fiercer. My sword had seen better days, its pitted blade dulled, yet I still raised it in a challenge that had more bravado than any true sense of victory. "Hunt's not over till one of us is in the dirt," I retorted. For a moment it paused, almost confused by my stance. Then to my astonishment, it drew back, the mockery vanishing from its face. "Intriguing. For a creature so puny, you hold a peculiar fire." This time, its voice held less scorn, almost a touch of respect. Or was that just its cruel trick, meant to feed my defiance? Just before it extinguished it, for good. With an abruptness that felt more dismissive than dramatic, it opened its wings, wind tearing at my ragged clothes. "No," it murmured. "This would be unsatisfying." Before I could process its words, the angel soared skyward, dissolving into the storm-dark clouds with impossible speed. Not in flight, but in retreat. It left me on that desolate headland, sword clenched in my fist, half ready to fight an open sky. For all my forced valor, A wave of bone-deep exhaustion washed over me. That fight would have ended me. Quick and bloody, that's how I would have gone. The damn thing knew it, spared me only because it craved a real game, not mere slaughter. A game where I was destined to lose. As the rain began to fall, a harsh mix of sleet and salt, I slid off the ringstone. Victory wasn't the right word. Not yet. Maybe something like a reprieve was closer. For all its power, its arrogance, even that damned creature needed the cover of darkness, it seemed. I sank down against the cold stone, and as the relentless sea wind began to chill me to the bone, I began to see the shape of my plan. If there was no fighting it head-on, no killing it in its lair, I just had to make sure it had nowhere to lair. Not while the sun blazed in the sky. No more night for it, no more shadows. Just the harsh, unending daylight. It was a fool's errand, and even I knew it. But I'd faced angels, hadn't I? Now it was time to see if I could outsmart one. Night brought both a reprieve and a fresh wave of dread. For now, the creature was earthbound, confined to whatever lair it kept deep in the encroaching dark. But tomorrow, well, I never liked planning for tomorrows that might not come. Better focus on the now. This headland was stark, exposed. All it took was one lucky flight for the creature to spot me. I needed better shelter. Just beyond the stone circle lay the ruins of some ancient dwelling. No more than tumbled boulders and moss-choked stones now, but a keen eye could discern the shape of what had once been walls. And best of all, a crude cellar gaped in the earth where rainwater had eroded away the packed dirt over the centuries. It was barely big enough for a man to crouch in, but that was more than I had now. Hours of back-breaking labour with broken stone and wind-gnawed driftwood created a lean-to across the cellar mouth. Nothing to keep out a determined predator, but decent camouflage if glanced at from above. As darkness took hold, I burrowed in, grateful for the stale, earthy smell that was preferable to the salt-laden gale. Tomorrow I would explore further inland, find whatever resources this harsh region offered. Tonight was about staying unseen. Sleep came only in fitful bursts, each snap of twig or howl of the distant surf jolting me wide awake. My hunter's senses had never been dulled by safety. They kept me breathing when far worse creatures than wolves roamed the land. Now they strained towards the darkness beyond my pitiful shelter. It wasn't there. Yet. But somewhere out there in that black expanse, my prey decided its next move. Come sunrise, I was on my feet again. Not much for a plan, just follow the line of the coast southward. Less open spaces for that damn thing to spot me from the air. Closer, I pushed to civilization. The better the odds of someone. Something that could hold its own against this new breed of monster. Maybe the old tales held true after all. Those hushed whispers of hidden orders, half-forgotten protectors waging an endless war against the forces of shadow. Or maybe it was just wishful thinking from a tired, terrified man. By mid-morning, a break. Not salvation, but survival. A half-hidden grotto carved into the cliffs, large enough to stand upright in, sheltered from the relentless wind. Most importantly, the tang of wood smoke filled the air. Not long abandoned, and the remnants of the fire pit were still warm. This far out, there shouldn't have been another living soul within a day's hard march. So was it another like me, hardened and hunted? Or something even less desirable? Time to find out. Show yourself! My harsh challenge echoed with hollow bravado against the cold stone. It was answered by a choked squeak, then a rustling from a recess carved further into the rock. Then it emerged, shambling into the faint light. No hardened survivor stood before me. Just a scrawny boy, hair the colour of straw, eyes huge and terrified. He could have been 12, 15 at most, wearing torn clothes several sizes too big. Yet he gripped a chipped stone knife, shaking, but holding it like a banner. A boy playing at being a man, the same way I was playing at being a hero. We stared at each other for a long, silent moment. He flinched at every creak of my worn clothing, the rough edge of my unshaven jaw. Finally, my own reflection echoed back at me, just as frightening in its own way as any winged horror. I lowered my empty hands and my voice. "It's all right, lad," I said, hoping those words were still in some part true. "I only need a moment's rest, then I'll be on my way." His grip on the knife loosened fractionally. Anything else?" he squeaked, trying to find the voice I probably would have had at his age. Just then, his gaze strayed just past my shoulder towards the grotto entrance. It took me a moment to follow it and another to process what I saw. There, silhouetted against the grey horizon, a single crow fluttered down toward us. Not the sleek otter's playful curiosity in its posture, but the sharp intelligence of an observer, its every tilt of the head seeming unnatural. My blood turned to ice. No mere bird this, I'd have bet my sword on it. That damn winged terror had found its messenger. It had found me. "Run!" I hissed at the boy. "South, along the coast, now!" Hope the creature wanted me more, that the boy just wouldn't seem worth its time when its true quarry stood right within its grasp. But I knew with a sinking heart that thing loved hunting just for the sport of it. I didn't wait to see if the boy grasped the gravity of the situation or bolted from the sudden threat. This wasn't the time for heroics, however twisted and tarnished that mantle hung on me. This was raw survival, every dirty trick the back alleys and backwaters had taught me, thrown against an enemy with powers and appetites beyond comprehension. The cliff path I'd followed south curved inland here towards a thicket of twisted thorns. Thorns thick and vicious-looking enough to snag even those monstrous wings for a critical few moments. If luck tilted my way just once more, that pause might be enough for me to pull something desperate from my tattered bag of tricks. I plunged into the brambles, tearing into my already scarred hands with reckless abandon. Every gasp of pain fueled me further, as if the harsh earth itself knew a reckoning was soon to pass through this lonely place. And on my heels, as swift and inevitable as nightfall, the beat of those shadowed wings echoed behind me. Then came the screech. Not my own this time, but one torn from the creature, showing surprise and genuine pain. Its descent to earth was less controlled than before, almost a crash landing through the thorny branches. My plan, feeble as it was, had worked, but only partially. I broke into a clearing just beyond the thorn thicket. This time, no hesitation when it came to revealing myself. This had to be where the fight played out. I sprinted across the uneven ground, every treacherous hidden stone turning the chase into a gamble on which one of us would lose our footing first. At the far edge of the clearing stood another ring of ancient stones. No time to stop, just a lung-shattering leap to scramble and pull myself up as I had on that storm-lashed headland. It landed behind me with a bone-jarring thud that rattled my fillings. And now, in this meagre expanse of worn rock and dying moss, stood my battleground. No elegant lunge of sword, no well-crafted alchemical trap. This would be a brawl where teeth and claws mattered more than fancy steel. And if I got close enough, there was still one vial within my satchel. An oily fire brew meant for destroying, perhaps strong enough to finally destroy it. For a sliver of a second, it hesitated. I saw it not in its face, that remained the mask of warped beauty, but in the tenseness of those massive wings, a hint of confusion in the predatory tilt of its head. I was the anomaly here, the one who'd managed to touch it before, hurt it. Now, standing tall between these weathered stones, the desperation had burned to something fiercer, a rage echoing a fragment of its own dark hunger. "Come closer then," I snarled, a rusty challenge. It tilted its head. That same cold amusement flashed back momentarily. But now, there was recognition burning in those inhuman eyes. Whatever its twisted nature, cleverness remained its most dangerous weapon. For a terrible moment it didn't advance. It merely spread its mighty wings to their full height, A display not of attack but of power. Each feather gleamed obsidian in the dim light, catching the wind as it began to howl around us. I braced myself, gritting my teeth. This wasn't the fight I'd imagined, but one decided on its terms. The wind roared in my ears, and it screamed a single, terrible word that shredded the air itself. Burn. The world became fire. Not physical, yet that didn't lessen its horrifying reality. It blazed behind my eyes, searing my thoughts, consuming every scrap of reason until there was only blind obedience. My hand shot to my satchel, fumbled against the rough leather until fingers closed around the familiar coolness of glass. My legs turned, carrying me back across the rough clearing. No fight, no resistance against the burning command echoing in my skull. One wrong step. A stumble to break the creature's hold, that was all I prayed for. But my muscles betrayed me, propelling me with sickening precision towards the shadowed horror standing tall amongst the thorns. Every fibre of my being fought the unnatural control warping my body. Yet that only intensified the agony until even screaming became impossible. It was then I glimpsed, through the fiery curtain consuming my will, the creature's cold smile of victory. My fingers fumbled, my knees buckled, but amidst the burning haze, something primal remained. My mind was its prisoner, but not my soul. With the last scrap of defiance against its monstrous intrusion, I hurled the vial not at the creature, but my own feet. The shattering of glass was followed immediately by a roar of unholy fire. But the flames licked at my boots, blackened my trousers, not consuming me as its twisted magic intended. The burning in my head did not lessen, but it sputtered, its absolute control broken by denying it the sacrifice it craved. My tortured mind reeled, and now, through the receding curtain of flame and agony, I saw it. In that briefest moment of hesitation as its hold snapped, there was something raw and ancient in the creature's eyes. Fear. Fear. It burned through me, scorching away the lingering vestiges of the creature's command. No longer just the terror of the hunted, but something new. In that flash of vulnerability, I saw the predator become prey. There were lines to be crossed, powers never meant for even its dark nature. It had reached too far, grasped too fiercely. And like me, it would pay the price. The creature staggered back, its wings no longer held out in menacing pride but folding around itself protectively. No graceful maneuver, but a ragged retreat from the remnants of its own misfired power. My vision flared red and the world twisted in the grip of pain. But still, amidst the chaos, I understood. My gambit hadn't just broken its control. It had wounded it on a level its angelic strength couldn't mend instantly. And fear, raw and ugly, was a wound far more grievous than any physical harm. "Run, then!" I croaked, my voice a ragged rasp in the aftermath of the creature's psychic scream. But there was iron under that ruined sound. Run back to the darkness and pray daylight comes slow tomorrow. With a hiss of rage and pain, it scrambled for flight, but even its ascent faltered, less like a being of air and shadowed grace, and more like a crippled bat flapping desperately for freedom. I didn't follow. Every movement sent shockwaves of agony through my skull, a burning reminder of the creature's unnatural assault. Yet, as I fell to my knees amongst the smoking embers, a grim chuckle rasped in my throat. Victory tasted of ashes and blood, but for now it was enough. This fight, at least this round, was mine. When I could raise my head again, the boy was back. He hovered at the edge of the clearing, watching me with an equal mixture of terror and awe. No judgment in his young eyes, just a dawning understanding of the monstrous reality lurking under the mask of the everyday. We were of the same breed now, he and I. Scarred, touched by forces few survived and no sane person dared comprehend. In his frightened, defiant stance, I saw a hint of something that might make him akin to me one day. My strength ebbed, my vision fading in and out with worryingly black spots. I nodded towards the fading shape of the retreating angel. not to urge him further south, but west. Inland, I managed to rasp out, the word barely discernible against the howl of the wind. Village needs warning. I might have said more, told him the truth about the endless battle we were now forced into, the terrible knowledge that lived behind the curtain of normalcy. But that would have to wait. First, I needed to rest, to let my burning mind heal as best it could under the weight of its new scars. His hesitation lasted only a second. No doubt tales of monstrous beasts were just fireside stories spun for disobedient children until today. Now, confronted with the grim reality, the raw truth burning in my eyes, the boy didn't need elaborate speeches. With a resolute nod, he was off, a blur of panicked movement carrying my warnings, however small, towards the world of daylight and fragile life that needed constant protecting. As blackness finally seeped in around the edges, I let myself collapse on the cold earth. This wouldn't be the end of our duel, the creature and I. We would both heal, each in our own twisted way. When next we met, I wouldn't be some wounded creature it could toy with. I'd be something just as broken and twice as determined. I wouldn't be just a cleaner anymore. No, I would become its hunter. That brief fear in its eyes sealed a monstrous bargain. I'd sacrificed a shard of my tattered soul to claim this strange, bloody victory. We were bound together now, hunter and the hunted. Let it come again, that fallen angel. Next time, the fire it brought would consume us both. Let that end this round of the eternal struggle. For today, against all odds, the hunted had survived. That sliver of defiance was the only sliver of humanity I dared cling to.